الله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وبعد. We begin, as always, in the name of Allah Azza wa Jal by asking Him to send peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May His peace and blessings be upon him and his family. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. By the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal, we have now arrived and we'll be covering today verse number 46 of Surah al-Mā'idah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this verse, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقفينا على آثارهم بعيسى ابن مريم مصدقا لما بين يديه من التوراة وآتيناه الإنجيل فيه هدى ونور ومصدقا لما بين يديه من التوراة وهدى وموعظة للمتقين وليحكم أهل الإنجيل بما أنزل الله فيه ومن لم يحكم بما أنزل الله فأولئك هم الفاسقون. We'll cover, inshallah ta'ala, these two verses today. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَفَّيْنَا عَلَىٰ آثَارِهِمْ بِعِيسَى ابْنِ مَرْيَمَ. And we sent, following in their footsteps, Isa, the son of Mary. Now the Mufassirin, they talked about the footsteps. What is the reference point here for the mention of Isa alayhi salam? And so if we go back to verse number 44, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in that verse, translation of which is, indeed we sent down the Torah in which was guidance and light, the prophets who submitted. The prophets who submitted. And it goes on to describe them. And the Mufassirin, they said that Isa ibn Maryam was one of those who was mentioned as a prophet who submitted. Right? So he is the one who is following in those footsteps, if you will, of those previous prophets. And from an Aqeedah standpoint, brothers and sisters, this is very important for us to understand. Our understanding of Isa, of Jesus Christ, our understanding of Isa, ibn Maryam, the son of Mary, is that he was a prophet, and a prophet alone. We believe that there were people after him that elevated his status beyond that of prophethood. That they made him into something that was divine, that had divine characteristics, that could give life and take it away, and do those things that are reserved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Not attributing that there were miracles in his life, but that these were things that he did out of his own volition because he was divine in nature, godlike in nature. And the Muslims have rejected this claim. They said, no, this is not our understanding of the Prophet Isa alayhi salam. And of course today, even, right, much of Christian theology is centered around the idea that Jesus is part of a Godhead, a Trinity, if you will, or a Godhead in which He Himself has divine attributes. But for Muslims, this was never in question. We understood that the Isa alayhi salam was a prophet amongst a lineage of prophets. Lineage of prophets. In other words, he's not the only one. And that any miracles he was given, and by the way, he was given incredible miracles that were not given to other people. The ability to heal, the ability to raise from the dead, these are things that were special miracles for Isa alayhi salam. But each one was done with the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As he mentioned in other places in the Quran. بِإِذْنِهِ. By the permission of God, I was able to do these things. Right? So from our understanding and belief system, all of the prophets they came with a unified message. And that unified message was to be followed. And so even in the case of Isa alayhi salam, he came in a lineage of prophets that were appointed by Allah to be prophet. This wasn't, again, even in today's terms, People don't vote prophethood. You don't get a council together and say, okay, you know what? This person is the best amongst us, so therefore they're going to be a prophet. It is what one of my teachers would say, it is a direct top-down affair. God chooses prophets, not human beings. And He chooses them and He deputizes them that they are now prophets to be taken out, to go out into the world and take the message and share that message. So this is what Isa alayhi salam did. He was appointed a prophet. He spoke as for we've gone into his miracles in the past, but he spoke at birth and all of these things. But here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, we sent following in their footsteps Isa, the son of Mary, and he said, what? مُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ التَّوْرَاةِ وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْإِنْجِيلِ فِيهِ هُدًى وَنُورٌ وَمُصَدِّقًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهِ مِنَ التَّوْرَاةِ. He says here, Isa alayhi salam was sent down confirming that which came before him in the Torah. And we gave him the gospel. So all of a sudden now you see here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directly linking the Isa alayhi salam to the previous traditions. Right? He's saying what? He came here to confirm what was in the Torah. He came here to say, hey, you all have left the teachings of the Torah behind. By the way, remember earlier in the week, we discussed how the Prophet ﷺ, in his own time, when adulterers came and there was a ruling to be given, they didn't want to give the ruling. The ruling was what? Was capital punishment, or at least a stoning of sorts. That was from their own scriptures. But they didn't want to apply that punishment because they had changed the laws due to princes and other people of royalty that had committed adultery in the past, and they didn't want to punish them. So here you see that over time, those laws changed. The laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they came in a book and they were changed. By the time it got hundreds of years later to Isa alayhi salam, he said, no, wait, we are here to reaffirm and bring back, revive, if you will. We would say revive the message of the Torah. So he came there to get people back onto the straight path, if you will. The straight path at that time was through the Torah. And that was the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Isa alayhi salam came confirming those laws, saying, no, those laws, those original laws, that's what you are to follow. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says though, that also, وَآتَيْنَاهُ الْإِنْجِيلِ, and we gave him the Injil. So, in a way, the Injil was a confirmation of the previous laws. Those previous books and the rulings that had come, the Injil was there to confirm that and say, look, now we are going to apply this law. This law is how we're going to apply. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that fihi hudan wa nur. In it was a guidance and a light. By the way, you see this description for the Quran itself, right? That it's also seen as a guidance and a light. So again, the idea being that all of these books had a primordial source in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that was revealing it to them as a light, as a guidance for mankind. People changed those words later. People changed what it was, what the rulings were later on. But the essence was to be a guidance for people. And it says here that we gave him the Injil, in which was a guidance and a light, confirming that which preceded it in the Torah. So this wasn't necessarily just a new book with new rulings and it was confirming what had happened before. It was trying to bring people back to the straight path. As a guidance, وَهُدًى وَمَوْعِظَةً لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. It came as a guidance and instruction, a warning for the believers and the righteous. This is the essence of the guidance for us, brothers and sisters. ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in the beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, in it, in this book you will find, this is the book in which there is no doubt, هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, a guidance for humanity, for the righteous, for those that seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, brothers and sisters, I've reflected on this often. What if Allah had just left human beings on their own? What if He had just left them on their own for guidance? We would be completely misguided. I mean, just think of how many times in world history, whether it's American history or world history, human beings have made the rules. And they've made their laws. I mean, the things that people would find acceptable at one time would be completely acceptable in another generation. Unacceptable in another generation. At one point, things like slavery, even in this country, were seen as being righteous. Or as being just normal course of behavior. You know, women having zero rights to property, to inheritance, just seen as normal rights. These were man-made laws. These were not divinely guided laws. We need Sharia. We need Allah's guidance for us to live a life to fulfill the truest form of our humanity. The truest form of our humanity. You know, literally the word Sharia, Shara Yushadu, it means to guide a camel to water. To guide a camel to water. Right? That path that you take to guide something. Now you can't get the camel to drink water. Right? But the path of nourishment, our own spiritual nourishment, is through following the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You know, it will, you know, how water gives life to somebody in the desert, right? That's what the idea of following Allah's commands should give life to us spiritually. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Hadith Qudsi that my servant comes closest to me by the obligatory acts, the things that are required of him. Or her, the things that they do, the coming to salah, praying 5 times a day, fasting in Ramadan, giving sadaqah, giving zakah, all of these things that are required of us, that's a means of coming closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's a means for us to revive our souls and to get that nourishment in the same way that a camel would be nourished at the water stream in the desert. That's what these laws are meant to do, brothers and sisters. And so it's a gift from Allah that He's given us this guidance and not left it up for ourselves. Allah knows where humanity would be. And we see it, unfortunately, in other societies where God is not at the center. What happens? Right? Man-made laws can be abused. They are, sometimes, in some cases, completely abusive. I mean, I remember, you know, and if you've read any of the writings or the speeches of Malik al-Shabazz, Malcolm X, rahmatullahi alayh, he talks about this extensively, about how even in this country, especially in the civil rights era, and some would argue even today, the systemic racism that is built into the institutions of this country, that's man-made. That's not from Allah. That's not from God. That's not, you know, that's a man-made system in order to try and keep a certain group of people from advancing, from doing well, from achieving that type of success. And yet here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, these books came as a guidance for humanity to remind them, once again, of what they had lost and how they were to get back on the straight path. Isa alayhi salam, brothers and sisters, Jesus was no exception. He brought this message to confirm what had happened, or to confirm the message, and to say what? This is hudan. This is a guidance, and nur, a light for believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says in the next verse, and let the people of the Injil, Ahlul Injil, judge by what Allah has revealed therein. Bima anzal Allahu fihi, and let them judge by what Allah has revealed in it. Now remember, previously, as we talked about earlier in the week, that the Prophet ﷺ, he asked the people in Medina that came to him, asked for a ruling. What does it say in your book? We'll go by the ruling of whatever is in your book. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here that let them judge by what we have already sent them. If they have issues or if they have things that they need to discuss, we've given them guidance. Again, don't leave it up to yourselves. Don't try and figure out the best thing. What is the ruling when it comes to sins? What is the ruling when it comes to obedience to God? Look into the books for that. And let the people of the Injil judge by what Allah has revealed therein. And by the way, some of the Mufassirin, they mentioned here that this applied until the revelation of the Quran. That this was the ruling until the Quran came. Once the Quran came, then the expectation is that they will rule according to the Quran, or that they become Muslim essentially, right? So that's one of the interpretations of this verse. They go on and they say, in the next part of the verse, وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. And whoever does not judge by what God has revealed, those are the ones who are defiantly disobedient. Brothers and sisters, once God has made a ruling for us, we don't have a choice in the matter. We should not have a choice in the matter. It is up to us now to follow Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands. I may not like getting up for Fajr. I may not like having to pray 5 times a day. That is not up to me. I don't get to negotiate and say, you know what? I'm very tired at night, or I'm very tired in the morning, and therefore, I'm just not going to pray Fajr, or I'm just going to pray Fajr later on, whenever I get up. We don't have that option. Why? Because in order to fulfill Allah's commands, God's commands, we have to follow them here. And He's told us what these commands are. The Mufassirin, the ulama, they've identified all of that. And so we have in our possession a book that has that guidance, that gives us the means of how to live our life. And in all of one of the most beautiful things about our tradition in particular, brothers and sisters, is that we also have what was arguably, who was the most documented and footnoted individual in pre-modern history in the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah did not just say, okay, you guys are on your own. He gave us an example in Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And like any other man in pre-modern history, his life was documented and footnoted for generations. People even know how he used to bathe himself and use the restroom. They even know what he would say, what speeches he would give, and how he would speak. They even knew what would excite him and what would anger him. All of these things, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserved for us so that you and I can live a life that is fulfilling to Him, that is obedient to Him, that is pleasing to Him. This is the essence of our tradition, brothers and sisters. And this is why we have this hudan and this nur amongst us with the Quran, this guidance and this light. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow all of us to take the Quran as a guidance and a light for us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a proper understanding of these verses and their application in our lives. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us forgiveness and forgive all those who have died before us in faith, and erase from our hearts any ill feelings towards others. Indeed, He is most merciful and forgiving. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين وجعلنا للمتقين إماما ربنا اغفر لنا ولوالدينا وللمؤمنين يوم يقوم الحساب ربنا اغفر لنا ولإخواننا الذين سبقونا بالإيمان ولا تجعل في قلوبنا غلا للذين آمنوا ربنا إنك رؤوف رحيم وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Jazakumullahu khairan. I hope to see everyone tonight at the annual fundraising dinner, inshallah ta'ala, for Adam Center.